Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am State Representative John Yates. I'm Chairman of the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee, and today we are here to take up House Bill 1072, which is a combination of an earlier bill, 535, and 1072, and this is a compromise from everybody concerned, including Mr. England, the head of appropriation. I'll say it's been a long, drawn-out battle to get to this point. Like all compromises, I guess everybody's not completely happy, but I was very concerned from the beginning. My friends across the street, Commissioner Pete Wheeler and his people. So what we were talking about the last few minutes is being sure we had the right version that had the grandfather clause and so forth in there. So today we'll start off and let Representative Judy Manning present her bill. And this is House Bill 1072, LC 334700S.
Chairman, members of the committee, can I present from here?
Thank you.
Is that good? Like Chairman Yates said, this is a compromise bill that has been brought forward with the help of Commissioner Wheeler and his staff, and also the Appropriations Chairman and several other members of the House of Representatives, including Representative Mary Margaret Oliver. It's actually in two sections. I'm on. It's just my voice. I can't. I've had a little case of laryngitis, so I apologize for the weakness of my voice. But the will is here. Anyway, it does two things. The first thing it does is it will allow the Veterans Services Board and the state to get the AA money that is an entitlement to veterans. In the first, in Part A, and then Section 2, it will say that they will apply for the nursing home designation for the veterans home in both Augusta and Milledgeville, where they will go ahead and apply for that designation in the hope that we can access federal funds for Medicare, Medicaid. And that's what it does.
Questions of the committee? So everybody had time to read it and understand it in the latest version? Anybody in the audience want to speak? Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
I have a question. Why weren't we doing this before with respect to the 38-4-56?
Actually, the proposition has been brought forward several times, but Commissioner Wheeler was a little reluctant to go forward with it, but he now understands in these economic times that we really need to go ahead and access those funds. It's about $3 million, and so he is agreeable to us going forward with that, provided we put the nursing home application and waiting for its approval so that some of the veterans in the homes currently can nutrition
Okay.
So it's my understanding then that Commissioner Wheeler is okay with this as long as the grandfather clause is in effect.
For Section 8, with this current version 4700, yes, it's my understanding he is okay with that. I think Dan's going to talk.
Maybe Mr. Holtz will speak up late about it, but it's my understanding that the commissioner and his people would prefer that we not have either bill but this is a compromise of what what was agreed to after we had several meetings on it amongst the chairman and Representative Manning and others. So I guess I want to clear up that point. That they'd rather not have any bills. I understand it, but let's see. Judy, you want to say anything else, Judy? Excuse me, Representative Manning.
Judy's fine. Thank you, Mr. Yates. We have been in talking about this for a number of years. I think now is the time to allow this to go forward if it is the pleasure of the committee.
Thank you. The first speaker is Mr. Dan Holtz, who's the assistant to Commissioner Pete Wheeler across the street, and look forward to hearing from you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it's good to be with you this morning. Commissioner Wheeler's not able to be here and asked me to speak on his behalf. I'd like to just kind of go very quickly but give a little bit of context to where we are today and how we kind of got here as we understand it. The state homes programs for Georgia dates back to the 1950s when the opening of the Veterans Home in Milledgeville occurred. The home was in response to Georgia's efforts to do more for its returning veterans than just paying them bonuses or pensions. The intent was to provide medical services in the form of nursing home care to war veterans when they needed that care. Based on that underlying principle, the funding pattern of state appropriations and VA per diem payments was established for the operation of these homes. Consequently, our department's official position on this legislation is we do not support it because it changes a basic tenet of the program that has been its staple since its inception. In general, we're opposed to any legislation that takes away benefits from Georgia's veterans. We believe any form of charging veterans for nursing home care in our veterans home where there have been no charges in the past will be perceived by Georgia's veterans as a reduction in benefits. In 2011, the appropriation law, the department was directed to study the participation of the veterans' homes in the Medicaid and Medicare programs. The study report recommended that we not participate in these programs. The study concluded the self-pay provisions of the Medicare program would mean money would be coming out of veterans' pockets. The receipt of Medicare funds would be limited and problematic due to the constraints associated with the Medicare program for nursing home care. The estate recovery requirements of the Medicaid program could cause families of deceased veterans whose nursing home care was paid for by Medicaid to lose their veterans' estates after the veteran's death or discharge from the veterans' home. The number of veterans for participation in the Medicaid program would be limited due to the income levels of many of the veteran patients who receive VA benefits and retirement incomes from other employment. There's also a duplication of federal oversight that comes with participation in these programs because the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services would start an annual inspection process, which we already have now from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and the processes would be the same using the same criteria. But as we look at the fiscal impact, we're concerned that we're going to have this additional burden placed on our staff, and when we look at the expected return, we're concerned as to whether or not there's enough return in terms of dollars for the amount of time that's going to have to be put into complying with all of these inspection requirements. The study report recommended the department be authorized to collect the VA's aid and attendance benefit that is paid to individual veterans to assist them in paying direct costs of medical care, including nursing homes. That's the definition in federal law for what the aid and attendance benefit is there for. However, at the state level, in order to receive that, there's got to be a fee process established and charged by the department and the homes to obtain those monies, and that's because that aid and attendance benefit is paid to the individual veteran, not to the provider of care. House Bill 535, which your committee already has approved, was an outgrowth of that recommendation. While we are opposed to changing the current process for funding the operations of the state's war veterans nursing homes, The proposed legislation before you today, which is Substitute Bill 1072, number 47-S or whatever, would do that. But it contains two processes, as Representative Manning discussed. It requires the department to seek Medicare and Medicaid funding approval from the federal government, and it authorizes the Department of Veterans Service to charge a fee to veteran patients of these homes in order to get to the value of the aid and attendance benefit. The provision related to the A&A benefit was 535, and we believe that that action is workable. The other issue in this legislation, Section 10456, relates to requiring the department to become a provider of nursing home services under the Medicare and Medicaid programs. We have been assured by the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee the intent related to the Medicare program would be for the state appropriations to cover that portion of the Medicare cost that the individual would pay. That is the 20% that they would have to pay out of their pocket for nursing home care from days 21 through day 100. And with the intent there is to do no harm to the veteran, and that being the case, that process would work for us. As this issue relates to Medicaid, there would be no charges to the veteran patients during their time in a nursing home. However, the estate recovery procedures of the Medicaid program would be effective during the nursing home stay and after veteran patients die or otherwise depart the War Veterans Nursing Home. This federally mandated process for the state to recover the costs of care provided by nursing homes could result in surviving family members having to liquidate assets, which could leave the family members without housing. The Medicaid program will take all of the veteran's income except for $90 per month as an offset to the cost of providing the nursing home care while the veteran is there receiving that Medicaid benefit. This is a major concern, and it brings up the question in a lot of people's minds, should veterans and their families be required to give up or liquidate their assets? This is a provision, there is a provision included in Section 10456, version 4700, which will grandfather current veteran patients of the homes from having to participate as Medicare and Medicaid recipients. The current veteran patients were admitted with the understanding the services of these homes would be at no cost to them. This grandfather provision would preserve that status for the current patients. Thus, the provisions of this section of the bill would only apply to newly admitted veteran patients of the homes after federal approval of the homes to participate in these programs is received. We appreciate the inclusion of this provision and believe it will moderate concerns from the current veteran patients to being included in these programs and the funding mix that's associated with them. New veteran patients admitted into the homes after these programs are implemented will be made fully aware before admission to the homes that the homes are participating in the Medicare and Medicaid programs and that the individual veteran patients may be a party to that, depending on what their income levels are and so on. From a veteran patient's point of view, where we have not been charging for care in these homes related to the VA's aid and attendance benefit, a similar grandfather provision would seem to be appropriate. We encourage the committee to consider including such a provision for Section 10457. We thank you for the opportunity to provide this, and I'm open to questions.
Is it that included the way you wanted it, you say, in the bill?
The grandfather provision, it is on 10456. What I'm saying here is that if it's the will of the committee, we would suggest that you consider doing a similar grandfather provision for Section 57, which has to do with the aid and attendance fee.
Is that what he's preparing? No, it's got to be included in it. It's not in. So it's this last version of 47.
No, it does not. Right. Sir, if you remember when we had our conversations last week, the original discussion document that you and I had when we spoke with Representative Manning did include a proposal to have a grandfather clause in both the aid and attendance fee section and in the Medicare and Medicaid section. Representative Manning indicated that she could not go along with that, and so that particular one was taken out for the fee, aid, and attendance portion. And all we're suggesting at this point is that the committee consider whether or not that should be put back in. And that's obviously the committee's call.
What's the financial implications of that if it's put back in?
If it's put back in, it will delay the collection of those fees, probably up to 2 years. We're seeing a turnover of patients at the Augusta home of about 325 days for an average length of stay. So just trying to project that out, it looks like we're probably talking something in the neighborhood of 2 years before we have a completely new group of patients. And the same turnover at Milledgeville is probably what we're looking at there also. We're getting a much sicker veteran coming into the homes, and we have been over the last 10 years. And we're getting them in, and their length of stay is getting shorter and shorter each year. So the turnover, it would take a little bit of time, and it would slow down the receipt of the funds, but it would, since we admitted these folks with the understanding that there would be no charge to them, it would provide that grandfathering for the fee as well as for the Medicare Medicaid piece.
I thought this latest version did include the grandfather. Don't?
Only for the Medicare and Medicaid.
Oh, okay. Representative, you have...
I believe that was included in 535, and this committee has already passed that bill. So that's the portion that was included in that. That's the aid and attendance portion. It's about a little over $3 million.
So
That's
so
correct.
if
That's correct.
535 goes all the way through the system, then it would take care of what you want? I mean, it's passed the House, but where is it?
It's passed out of
It's
this.
passed out
it's
of
in
this
the-
committee.
It's in the Rules
Yeah.
Committee. It's
Yeah.
in the Rules Committee, and what Representative Oliver allowed us to do was to marry 535 to 1072 in the hope that we could travel as one bill.
But it's not in 1072?
Yes, sir, it is.
Oh, it is in this latest version. Okay. Is that? So we got some questions here. Maybe I'll ask those first. Numbers. Yes, Brian, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to be clear first. 535 that we passed out, did it have a provision in there, a grandfather provision?
No, sir,
It did not. So it mirrors language that's currently
Right,
in
the
this bill we have
section
before us.
57 in the current bill you're looking at is the language from the 535 that you've already passed, yes.
Very, very briefly, could you remind me exactly what veterans are eligible for use of the homes?
Any veteran who has lived in the state of Georgia for 5 years immediately prior to admission and has served during a period of wartime is eligible for admission.
And I just had a quick question about the Medicaid state recovery. So, are there limits to what resources in the estate can be taken to offset the government's expenditures for Medicaid?
It's my understanding that there are some limits. I'm not familiar with all the details of that at this point. I know that we're looking only at the veteran's income that would come in. If there's a spouse, the spouse has income. If that's the case, it's my understanding that the spouse's income would not be affected, but the veteran's income would be affected.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as I was listening, my questions are addressed to the 38-4-56 section, lines 14 through 27, if you have this latest version, the 4700S. As I was listening to you, you made a number of cogent arguments against it, and I didn't hear much in favor of it, but I thought that I heard you say that it was workable. So can you just help me understand a little bit better whether this is something that you favor or don't favor? Because it sounds, if I were to guess, that you don't favor this 38-4-56.
Basically, we do not favor it.
Okay.
Okay. Having said that, if that legislation passes, we will do everything in our power as a state agency to make it work.
And is the primary reason why you don't favor it because of the duplication of effort that will be involved with having two federal agencies that will oversee this, or are there other reasons besides that?
The reasons basically are the impact on the veterans, particularly in the Medicaid piece with the estate recovery issues, and on the Medicare piece with Chairman England's assurance that the intent is to do no harm. The concern we have there is at least moderated, but we have not been able to do the research on that to make sure that there's not some federal requirement out there that says only the individual who is the Medicaid recipient can pay that 20% copay. And there's several people, when I was talking with them last week, raised that issue, and they weren't sure either. So we've got to look into that, and unfortunately I don't have that information. But if we're able to do what Chairman England has proposed, then the concern we have about that 20% copay would go away. Then our next concern is the duplication of the oversight provision. So there's really three things that we're concerned about, two that are major concerns. One is moderated because of Chairman England's expression of do no harm.
I understand. So if your independent research confirmed the position that Chairman England has relayed to you, then that would allay that concern, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But we don't know that today.
We don't know that at this moment.
Got it. Thank you.
Couple of questions. Do you have any data on the percentage of the patients that would be subject to estate recovery?
Well, it would be those who would be eligible for Medicaid, and we're projecting, again, we don't have any firm figures because right now we don't have anybody that we know for sure is Medicaid eligible. But based on the information we have available to us on how many of our veteran patients are receiving VA benefits, we're projecting that the number of Medicaid eligibles is something in the neighborhood of less than 30%. But until we actually do the calculation on an individual basis, I can't give you a hard number, but our projection based on our knowledge of VA benefits is that we're looking at something less than 30%.
Of the people that qualify to get services, how is your backlog, or do you have a backlog, and if so, how much?
Today, our waiting list, we have a waiting list at both facilities. I believe there's about 17 in Augusta and about 14 in Milledgeville, but they are on that backlog waiting list, not because we don't have beds. We do have beds. It's because they've gotten approved for admission, but they're not quite ready to come in just yet. We have open beds. At Augusta, our budget for Augusta is 170. We're at 158 to 160 at the current time. At Milledgeville, the budget is 250, and we're around 230. So we've got beds available, but we can't fill them. And the reason we can't fill them is we keep filling them, and as we admit a patient, another one ends up dying, and that's what's happening. The attrition rate is just keeping us stable where we are.
You indicated you wasn't certain about the restrictions on that estate recovery. If someone has just had to deal with it, I can tell you that there's virtually no restrictions. If the person becomes subject to that, the entire state can be wiped out.
On the Medicaid, yes, you're right on the Medicaid. Yeah, the part that we're not sure about is on the Medicare side for the copay.
Thank you.
Right now, I'd like to welcome all the, I see American Legion, friends in American Legion is in the VFW here. Any other service organizations? It's a pleasure having you all, and at this time, Dan, if you just step by temporarily. Yeah. I want to recognize Mr. Youngblood, American Legion, to come up to the podium and tell us what you have on your mind. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks, my name is Phil Youngblood. I'm the commander for the American Legion for the state of Georgia. Our American Legion family is approximately 60,000 members strong. A couple of comments in reference to some of the questions in the conversation here. One of the key phrases that I keep hearing here is to do no harm. I've heard that two or three different times, but it's constantly geared towards a money issue as far as to do no harm towards the veteran. The American Legion would like to go on record as supporting the original comment from Mr. Holtz, Commissioner Wheeler's office, that we really don't want to see anything done to impede or to stop the way the veterans are being treated in the war veterans homes. We're doing this, and we applaud the department, Commissioner Wheeler's department, Mr. Holtz's comment, that if this passes and the law becomes final, that this is workable, it's doable. Obviously it is. They're a state agency. They have to do it. That's an understandable point. And I know that the American Legion and the other veteran service organizations would be behind them and be supporting them in doing that. I'm still concerned. I keep coming back to this thing to do no harm. We've talked about, or you've talked about, I should say, about grandfathering different levels to ensure that they don't end up having to pay because they've been in there for a while. Sir, you brought up the point about whether or not the different levels of payment, how it would be done. There's no guarantee of how things would be done. I would like for you to key on the phrase that came from here, to do no harm. We're asking that this committee, that the folks here in this room understand that these veterans that are in the war veterans home have already paid. They've paid already these prices that we're talking about, this 20%, these conversion rates, these different things from Medicaid and Medicare. As Representative Black stressed or asked the question about the losses to the veteran's family once the veteran deceases, or is deceased rather. These are going to be terribly traumatic losses. Veterans not in the war veterans home because they're financially solvent. They're not there because they have a great deal of funds. And then all of a sudden we're going to open up Medicare and Medicaid potentially. Now how far down the road before some federal law or some little niche in the federal law, somebody challenges it, and all of a sudden we have non-veterans in the war veterans homes? There's got to be a break point somewhere. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak. I would ask that, again, for about the fourth time during this presentation, again, use your phrase, to do no harm. And I ask that you please consider that. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, sir. I want to say for myself, I think this myself and this committee is, since I've been chairman, we have always thought of the veterans first, and I think we've been pretty good toward that during the last few years. And right now we're facing a worldwide recession. Every department has had to be asked to contribute. And I'm hoping that we have hit bottom. The last 7 month reports from the governor has indicated that revenue is up over the prior year. And in reference to the gentleman's last statement, if the federal government changes something, of course, we in the legislature every year, and it can be restored if it's doing harm to veterans. So I just want to add that in, that I think everybody, I can speak for everybody on this committee, is that we are very much, everybody I think asked to get on this committee because they are interested in veterans, and some of them are veterans, and like I am. And I want to say that to be sure that you do understand that we are very much pro-veteran, and that's the first thing I was thought of in asking how did Commissioner Wheeler feel about it, and I've been working with Mr. Holtz and so forth. So is there anybody else we wanted to speak? The list, we had 2 people on the list, and they both spoke. I mean, of course we've got to come back to see if Mr. Holtz wants to say anything. Does any member want to say anything about anything that's come up at this point? Mr. Holtz, you want to come back and say anything else?
I'd just like to, I guess, conclude by saying that, you know, if we go down this road, this is going to be a major sea change for the state of Georgia. We are the only state in the nation that currently does not charge our veterans anything to be a veteran patient in a state veterans home. That is a situation that I think we have all been very, very proud of for many, many years. And from a personal standpoint and from representing Commissioner Wheeler, I know that that's a major concern for him, and it's a major concern for me, and I think Commander Youngblood expressed the similar feelings on that. Our concern budget-wise is that, yes, these things would bring some additional revenue in. Can't project exactly how much. We've got a better feeling for how much it would be on the fee side of the house than we do on the Medicare and Medicaid. And on the fee side of the house, we're looking at something in the neighborhood of, just from the fee itself, a maximum of around $3 million. If that's $3 million that is added on to the approved funding for the homes that we can then use to admit or attempt to admit even more veteran patients to both homes and restore the beds that are sitting idle today, such as the 60-plus beds that we have in the Vincent building, you know, that's all good, because those $3 million would be matched by additional federal dollars on a one-to-one basis. If we're not able to do that because we find ourselves in an offset situation going down the road, then what have we gained? You know, we're still dealing with the same number of dollars. It's just coming out of a different pot. I know initially when all of this first started, everybody said that it was the desire that everyone had on both the House and the Senate side to increase the funding for the homes. And if that's still the goal, then that's a good thing. But if we're going to get into an offset situation down the road, and obviously we have no control over that here, that will be a concern. Yes, sir.
Offset from what reason now?
Due to state funding concerns, that projections are made that, well, we can get $3 million out of these
You mean
fees.
budget cuts?
Budget cuts, yes, sir. Yeah, that would be a concern. And like I say, that's not anything that any of us can do anything about here, but it's just something that I put out there to consider because it's a concern.
Overall, you would say that we will still be able to take care of veterans reasonably well, then?
Yes, sir.
I know that we don't ever want to cut, and we certainly don't want to cut if we're going to hurt somebody on this. And say we do have a worldwide recession that we have to deal with all departments. Is anybody else got anything you want to add?
Yes, sir, Mr. Holtz. Just a real quick question. I want to drop back on the 38-457. You were talking about originally the grandfather clause in that. You said that you were looking for more information as to whether Medicaid or was it Medicare?
It was Medicare, and it's on 56.
Okay, you said that you were looking for more information on that.
Right. What we're trying to get our hands on is there's a concern that 20% copay on Medicare that kicks in on day 21 of a nursing home stay. Chairman England said to me the other day that he would presume the state appropriation would cover that. The question came from some of our folks in the field. We're not sure that the Medicaid rules will allow for somebody other than the individual Medicare recipient to pay that copay. And that's what we're trying to find out exactly
How
what the
fast
rules.
do you think we can get a clarification on that?
We're working on it as fast as we can, and I you know, as soon as we can get our hands on somebody who can, you know, answer that question, we can get word back to Chairman Yates and get it to you.
Problem I guess we're facing is we're facing a time deadline here. Right, we are. We're facing crossover day. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Representative.
That I believe that in the best interest of not only the veterans but also the state, that we go forward with 1072, allowing the grandfather clause to go to the Medicare, Medicaid portion, and then being able to access the A&A money, and that will be about $3.5 million or so. I would appreciate this committee, you know, looking favorably on that suggestion, not only from where I'm coming from. I've been on the appropriations subcommittee that handles Veterans Affairs for a number of years, and we've looked at this over the past probably 10 years and have never done anything about it because of Commissioner Wheeler's willingness to make sure that the Veterans Administration is carrying on its mission and doing that properly and currently. This committee has already passed 535, which is a part of 1072 in its entirety. So I would offer that to the committee for their consideration.
So all of 535 is in this bill, right? Okay. Thank you. Representative Hatchett.
Haven't heard everything. I'd like to make a motion to do pass.
Now is the proper time.
I'd like to make a motion to do pass.
Do pass?
Yes.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? The motion fails for the lack of a second. This will conclude this part.
I would like the committee to reconsider this. You've already passed that.
You asked for a reconsideration now? Is that what you said?
Yes, sir. I think Commissioner Wheeler and Dan, you kind of, I thought had a gentleman's agreement. This is something that we would work toward in the hopes that we could, carry on and be able to access the money that is readily available.
Well, I would say the problem right now is not Commissioner Wheeler. That this committee is the one that's deciding this. We've already had all the agreements with the commissioner, and as I say, he's indicated, although I'm sure he preferred that it go another way, that he said that he, as a good department head, that he can live with what we got here. Yeah, it's got well, she was recommending that she don't make the motion, of course. Does anybody want to make the motion for reconsideration?
I'll make a motion to reconsider. I'd like to see the vote on it.
Like to see what?
I'd like to see the vote on it.
Oh,
So we gotta have a second. So
well, we're not
second.
going. We can't vote on it unless we have a second. So.
There can be no motion to reconsider something that hasn't taken place. We had a bill before us, there was a recommendation be passed, but there was no second. There was no
Okay.
reconsideration.
Well, that was what I was concluding. I guess I was letting everybody have the conversation. So the motion fails, and I want to, if the members got a few minutes, I want to bring up something else after, and this concludes the meeting as far as this bill is concerned today. So anybody can leave if they so desire. I was going to bring up a couple of things here with the committee. I wanted y'all to see, I went around and got all y'all to look at this remembrance flag, and I wanted to see what it looks like, so if you want to pass that around. And then the other day, we passed the House Bill 800, and the two generals who I have great respect for talked to us. They asked that I read y'all the comments that they made, and they're not very happy with some of them, I'll tell you. As chairman of this committee, like that remembrance flag, I want all over the place to be sure that everybody got a chance to sign that, and that's the way I operate the committee. I want everybody to be involved. So I'd be derelict if I didn't tell y'all what they thought. They're two highly respected war veterans, and the gentleman that talked to us the other day made such a big fuss about this in the House. He was the captain under them in Desert Storm, and so anyway, this is from General Thielman. He's my friend down in Griffin. I wish to express my sincere thanks for the opportunity to discuss House Bill 800 in your office on Monday. As stated by Major General Hughes and myself, we feel the changes provided in 800 do not serve the needs of the Georgia Guard. I particularly appreciate your willingness to listen to our opinions on the matter of importance of Georgia Guardsmen. I wish to again thank you for your years of service to the military during World War II in Georgia House, representing your patriotism, devotion to state and nation, commitment to the citizens of Georgia, and high ethical standards serve as an inspiration to all. Thank you for all you do for General Hughes and myself. General Hughes says I write to thank you for meeting with you and myself and the committee yesterday, and he met with me and Brother Hatchett in my office. We are blessed to have at least one World War II veteran. Anyway, he said that they are concerned about the impacts on the Guard, and I have had a number of calls from the Guard, so I just want to tell you that I know everybody did it in their best feelings of what they thought was right at the time, and of course, as you know, the governor was pushing this very hard. So I hope it all works out, but just wanted to share that with you. And I do appreciate everybody's coming to the meeting today, and I think we gave it a thorough hearing, and I hope that our people across the street can do their usual good job in implementing this. And thank you for coming today.